Good morning. I am here with Rebecca Heiss, and this is Lynn King-Smith, TicketForce, and we are ready to brighten your Friday morning and talk about flipping the switch on stress in your workplace and in your life. And let me tell you, this is going to be a good one. So if you want to gather some other folks into your office, please do that. And please make sure everybody knows what they're missing. So we're going to wait just a moment for all the attendees to pop on, and then we will begin in about 1 minute. So good morning and welcome. While we wait, I'm going to shout out to some of our loyal attendees this week who are I've seen. I haven't been on every one, but Kathleen, I think you've been there every time this week. Paul Sant, hi Paul, I think you've been in there pretty much every day as well. It's nice to see you, Lucas. Wally, and I think you've been on there all week as well, and Wendy Garner. Tess, I've seen you a lot. Why don't I just read everybody's name? But we really appreciate it. Hey, Jerry. Nice to see you, Chris. We love having you guys join us live. We know a lot of people watch later, but we really enjoy having you on live. Today, you will in particular have an opportunity to make sure that you get your questions answered. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Rebecca Heiss. Now, I met Rebecca at a Vistage meeting, which is a CEO peer group I'm part of, and she does travel the country, probably the world, traveling and speaking. And she has a great message. She actually has her PhD with research designated as transformative by the National Science Foundation. So you're a scientist, right? Yeah.
I am. Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute myself there.
Yes.
I'm a scientist. I'm a stress physiologist by trade.
Wow, that's fantastic. So she is an awesome resource, and we hope to get a lot out of what she has to offer today. But she's going to be talking about biological ghosts and adaptations. When I heard her speak for the morning with a room full of CEOs, it was one of the most life-altering CEO meetings I've had, Rebecca, and I am since doing some really practical things about stress, but you can imagine, and I let her know that you guys all work at venues and have high stress careers as well, because you've always got somebody pushing stress down from you, whether it's your promoters, the directors, artist management. There's pressure coming from all over the place, and you have to use technology, you have to move fast, you have to keep everybody happy. And sometimes we forget that we're in the entertainment business and we're just supposed to be helping people have fun. So we want to keep that, and fun is a great stress reliever as well. But honestly, anybody who knows that's worked in a venue or a box office, we love that moment of excitement, but there's also a lot of pressure working up to it. You've got 2 hours to make sure everything really goes well, and we want all of that to happen. So anyway, Rebecca ultimately founded Biologic Balance. She has a stress hormone and consultation company, and it helps us all become our best biological selves. And I love it because there's so much science there, but we think we're like really unique individuals. And she did a couple exercises with us on that Vistage day, and we're like, oh, we are so predictable. Science actually works. So it's pretty crazy. She's got a TEDx talk out there. And I think if you have the opportunity to bring her in or utilize her materials with your staff, you'll find it incredibly valuable. But here's our gift to you as we close out. We're at level 5 this week on our TF Live event for 2018. And I can't think of a better way to close it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, and I'll be fielding your questions. She doesn't mind if you interrupt her along the way, just by typing questions in the question panel, and I'll do my best to field those. So since I'm doing that, I'm going to turn off my webcam for the moment, but I will still be here in listening and speaking mode. So have at it, Rebecca, and everybody enjoy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction, and I am completely thrilled to be with you all here today. to talk about flipping the switch on stress in order to become your best biological self. Just listening to Lynn's introduction there made me stress out about the amount of stress that you all have. So I'm pretty excited about this. And this is what I want to offer you today. I want to give you this magical pill. Now, Lynn introduced me. I am a doctor, but I'm not the useful kind, right? I can't write you a prescription, unfortunately. So that's the bad news portion. The good news portion is that I can give you this magical pill because it's something you already have. And this magical pill optimizes productivity, improves your decision-making process, it improves your listening, decreases your stress, it increases your creativity and innovation. It's ultimately going to save you about $3,000 per employee per year. And that's kind of a big deal. So it always surprises me that people don't use this incredible magical pill that exists right here between your ears. So I've had the ultimate privilege of studying the brain now for longer than I care to admit. And the brain is this great organ, right? It's got 80 billion neurons in it. That is an absurd number. And I'm particularly interested in the connections between these individual nerve cells because that's what drives behavior. And that's on the order of 125 trillion connections, which is the same as saying you have the same number of connections in your brain as there are stars in 1,500 Milky Way galaxies. Now, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will, but that stresses me out because I'm trying to figure out why anybody does anything based on 125 trillion different connections, and it seems like an impossible task. And this is where most neuroscientists get kind of haughty about it. They're like, yeah, brain science, it's so complicated. And the reality is it's not. It's actually pretty simple because all of our behaviors relate back to two things and two things alone. And my guess is you guys probably already know what those two things are. Sex and survival. That's it. That's it. We like to think that we're these really complex savants of the animal world. But the reality is our brains operate a lot more like this. And again, I'm not trying to insult any of you all. My brain operates the same way on basic principles. And the problem with that, well, before I get to the problem, let me explain why that is. The reason that our brain operates more like that monkey is that if you took all of human history and you condense it into a 700-page book, this is going to be probably the most boring book that you have ever read in your entire life. Because for the first 650 pages or so, we're just all wandering around the savannah trying not to die. All right, it's not really until page 650 that something pretty exciting happens. The agricultural revolution occurs and humans start hanging out in groups together a little more. Page 690, the prophets Jesus and Muhammad supposedly appear. 698, the Enlightenment. 699, the USA is discovered. It's really not until the very last page of this super long and super boring book that anything truly remarkable happens in terms of our brain chemistry. So on page 700, halfway down that page, the Industrial Revolution occurs. And suddenly, we have airplanes and space stations and cars and telephones and FaceTime, and we go from a population having never been above 1 billion individuals to pushing now close to 8 billion connected people. Now that's a problem because where technology has sort of gone and increased exponentially, biology is really slow. And the result of that is that our brains, despite the fact that we're living in this really technologically advanced world, are stuck somewhere back on page 650. I create a lot of mismatches. And again, I'm not trying to insult you. This is a smart group. I'm sure you're probably closer to page 651. But the reality is we have all of these mismatches with this ancestral brain and a modern environment. And that causes a lot of stress. So let me give you an example of one of the mismatches that our ancestral brain creates for us in the modern world. What do you suppose the number one fear is in America outside of death today? I usually get answers like loneliness or, I don't know, instability in finances or all these really sort of deep responses. And the reality is, remember, snakes. Snakes? That seems absurd. That seems like completely ridiculous. And it is completely ridiculous because we're not living 650 pages ago, right? We're not living in our ancestral environment, but it made a lot of sense for our ancestors to be scared of that. This is just evidence that we still have those ancestral brains living in the modern world. Now, if we were thinking, if we were rational in our fears, which this is really important, we aren't rational in the way we fear, in the way we stress, in the way we act in the day-to-day basis. Which means if we were actually rational beings, what is the number one thing that we would fear? How about that? The new Krispy Kreme doubled down, some combination of fats and sugar and sweets. And I don't know about you, it's probably getting close to lunchtime for y'all, which means that is looking pretty darn tasty. And yet the number one thing that we die of is heart disease. And so fats and sugar should look to us like a laser beam of an AK-47 directly pointed at our heart. They should be terrifying. But you're probably sitting there salivating a little bit because they taste good. Well, why would they taste good? Well, again, think back to the kind of brain that you have. If you have an ancestral brain in the ancestral environment, you couldn't get enough fats and sugars. And we're going into a long, hard, tough winter that I know you all are going to be, well, sitting in a nice, cozy, warm, sheltered environment. And our ancestors couldn't get enough of that. And yet you can go down right now to your local Big Mac, McDonald's, whatever, and get $5 worth of 5,000 calories in under 5 minutes. So there's these mismatches with our ancestral brain in a modern world. Okay, so the question becomes, what's your blind spot as it relates to you and your work? Well, all I want you to do right now is to take a very close look at this mass of colors. Pick a spot on that mass of colors, and while I'm talking, just focus in on that spot and stare directly at it. What you're going to notice is that as I continue to talk, the colors are just going to disappear. Wait for it. It's kind of crazy, but your brain starts to adjust and say that will always be there, and suddenly you only see white. That's exactly what your brain is doing all of the time. And here's the scariest thing that I'm going to tell you for the entire talk. The scariest thing I'm going to tell you today is that the brain is processing about 400 billion bits of information every single second. And yet you're only aware consciously of about 2,000 of those. Which means, if you want to do the math with me really quick, 99.9999999% of the time, you're operating from your subconscious. You're operating from that ancestral set of rules that programs you to exist and to survive. Not to thrive, but to survive. And that's what we're going to break through today. All right, so we all have these blind spots, the stories that we tell that may or may not be so true. So the first one I want to explore is BS number 1, and that never works, especially on a webinar. I took the day off after writing that. I thought blind spot, BS, it's kind of funny, but nobody ever gets it. I chuckle every time, so thanks for humoring me with that.
I get it now.
Sorry?
I get it now.
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, and you still didn't laugh, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna keep trying.
Yeah.
All right, so BS number 1 is what we know that just isn't so. A lot of us know that stress is normal. So let's explore that a little bit closer. So stress is normal. It was really useful for our ancestors. When they're out hunting and they become the hunted, that's a useful time to have a stress response. The trouble is that doesn't translate very well into the modern workplace. And we get all kinds of stimuli that set off a stress response that probably shouldn't. The to-do list being overflowing, all of the social media that we're constantly on, overstimulation from communication, pesticides, too much sugar, traffic jams. Any of you sit in a traffic jam this morning? How did your heart rate and your breathing rate change? And you're going, oh my gosh, I just gotta get there. Why? What's the story you're telling that you have any control over this? See, our brains, again, are not that bright. They're making errors all the time because there's only one way that they know how to respond to stress. So if a tiger jumped into this room right now, first of all, it would be terrifying for many reasons, but if a tiger jumped into this room right now, I'm going to have a stress response. It's the exact same stress response as I would have when I look at my phone and I see, oh my gosh, I have 20 email notifications that I haven't answered today. And that is a lot less useful. And yet our brain is really dumb at interpreting a perceived threat from a real threat. And so it reacts the same way. This is one of my favorite quotes about stress. It's much like flooring the gas pedal with your car in park. If you do it for a prolonged period, something in your engine is going to break. And that's exactly what happens. So we have this classic fight or flight response to stress. There's a threat, a perceived attack, or a real attack. And our brain goes through this whole process and produces chemicals, and ultimately you have a cortisol released response. Now, cortisol is really useful. I'm sure you've experienced these physical effects where your heart rate increases, you might start shaking, your bladder might relax. It's a little nerve-wracking at times, right? But if you have to get up in front and speak in front of a really large crowd or do math problems, imagine somebody giving you math problems that you have to solve as quickly as possible in front of a crowd. That might give you a little stress. Here's the interesting thing. Eustress and distress release the exact same hormones. Now, eustress is good stress. So something really positive happens to you and your heart rate increases because you're so excited. The exact same response as if a tiger comes in. So this can cause some issues. So if we look at what our brain is used to, and this is cortisol, our main stress hormone. Our brain is used to having an increased spike in cortisol when there's a stressor. So our ancestors probably had 1 or 2 stressors a day, maybe, if that. The main stressor being, oh, I'm hungry, I have to go outside. Maybe it's cold, or maybe there's some dangerous animal out there. So they might have had a little spike in cortisol, but then it immediately came back down again. Here's what we're seeing with the modern environment. The cortisol levels start higher. You'll see that baseline starting higher right here. So originally starts a little bit lower than 10. Now it's starting at 15. And once it goes up, like you have your morning cup of coffee and now you're in the car and the kids are screaming, or once it goes up, it stays up. It never really goes back down to baseline. And this is the problem and the source of a lot of the issues that we're seeing in the modern environment. So anxiety disorders, headaches, negative moods, insomnia, depression, they feed from this increased cortisol. So this moves me sort of into the BS number 2, which is what we don't know that we don't know. Now, we tell ourselves a lot of stories like, oh, don't worry about it. I mean, it is, after all, just stress. All right, so let me pause there and say it's just stress. How many of you have thought to yourself, okay, I'm having a bad day, but don't worry, it's just stress? I would say probably a lot of us have had that experience before, but I'm about to stress you.
Rebecca, you just got muted. We just lost your sound, Rebecca.
Molecules that float around your body, and they unravel the tips of telomeres. The telomeres are the tips of your chromosomes, and they control how long you live, i.e., how quickly and rapidly you age. So if you're not worried about dying early or aging quickly, keep on being stressed. Don't worry about it. The second thing that stress does is it halts the production of new brain cells. So we used to think that the brain was the brain, it was always going to be the brain, and you just sort of lost brain cells over time. But in reality, we're constantly producing new brain cells. Stress stops that production, and it even depletes the brain neurotrophic factor that protects your existing brain cells. So if you're under constant stress, you're not able to adapt, you're not able to grow new brain cells, and you slowly get dumber with time. Chronic stress also depletes these hormones, serotonin and dopamine. Serotonin and dopamine are your happy hormones. They're the things that make you feel good. And it also lowers testosterone. Now, this freaks out a lot of guys, but women, we have to be concerned about this as well because testosterone supports bone health as well as a number of other things. So depleting all of these hormones, including oxytocin, cuddle hormone, the happy hormones, it's really wreaking havoc on our whole physiological system. Stress also negatively impacts every cognitive function, save one. It lights up this little portion of our brain known as the amygdala. That's where the fear and reactionary processes happen. So if you want to be reactionary instead of proactive, and you're constantly living in a state of fear, well, that's probably what you're doing automatically right now, because again, we live so constantly normalizing this stress response. Stress also allows more toxins into the brain. So let me back up and explain what happens in a normal day. In a normal day, you have this great thing between your blood and your brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier, and it protects your brain from all of the garbage and junk that you put into your body throughout the day. So everything from cigarette smoke to toxins in the environment to the chemicals in the foods that we're eating that aren't very healthy for the brain. And that filter or that blood-brain barrier acts as a filter to keep all of that out. When you're under chronic stress, what that does is it expands the pores of the blood-brain barrier, and it allows more junk to get into your brain. That's a bit of a problem, because when you do that, it depresses the immune system, and so of course you get sick more frequently. I'm absolutely certain that you've probably all experienced this, where you're super stressed out, you just cannot afford to be sick, and of course, that's when you get sick. It's your body's natural way of shutting you down, preventing you from doing any more damage. All right, so we end up feeling really lousy, and we end in this negative positive feedback loop where we feel like garbage. And so what do? Well, we grab sex or drugs or alcohol or food that's really bad for us. So we get a little boost of that serotonin and dopamine, those happy hormones, and we feel a little bit better about ourselves. And then we crash down even harder, and we need more the next time, like any drug. Stress has been called a global epidemic by the World Health Organization, and the American Psychological Association links chronic stress to all 6 of the leading causes of death. So I want to return to that question. What is normal about stress? I think that we really have a major issue on our hands that we haven't addressed, and we've continued to normalize it. Like, how you doing? Oh, I'm stressed. Yeah, me too. Haha. It's a really big deal. If somebody tells you they're stressed, you should be like, oh my goodness, what can I do for you? This is problematic. This is going to lead to your death, your early demise. And yet we treat it as just another day, no big thing. So I don't know if you're a child of the 80s like me, but this was a formative public service announcement for me. There was these public service announcements, and I think they were 80s and 90s. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. And they showed this egg, and it was so formative to me that I decided I would co-opt it and steal it because it's so effective. So this is my new campaign that I want you to think about. This is your brain, this beautiful eggshell that's creative and innovative and focused and productive and capable of thinking outside of the box and adaptable. Your brain really is remarkable. And yet, your brain on stress really does look fried. You have fatigue, anxiety, low morale, you become more irritable, short-tempered, you frequently will abuse alcohol and drugs. And here's a really interesting one. You have more ethical violations. So if you have employees in your company that are high-level stressed, what ends up happening is they cheat more. It's really fascinating. I can go into your company, have them spit into tubes, measure their cortisol samples, and say, ooh, watch out for her. She's a risk for an ethical violation just based on stress. So the question, of course, becomes, who are you and who do you want working for you? Do you want this brain or this brain? A lot of times I hear that, if you don't have a little bit of stress, then what's the point? And that's a really good argument. For optimal performance, you have to have a little bit of stress. So optimal performance and stress looks like this inverse U curve that you're seeing here. If you have zero motivation, zero stress, say you're the winner of that $1.6 billion lottery ticket that was sold literally 2 miles from my house. Thank you very much. No, wasn't me, unfortunately.
Right.
But you're that winner. And you have zero stress in your life. Your family's perfect. You've got finances. You're golden. You have no motivation. You have no real interest in performing. But with just a little bit of stress, say you have a set deadline, it's achievable for sure, but you're going to have to work a little bit to get there. That's when your optimal performance happens. So you have a little bit of arousal from that stress. Unfortunately, most of us live over here in this impaired performance state because we're constantly, well, and I do think these are probably one of the most dangerous reasons that we are in that space. We're constantly bombarded with sugar, big problem, and social media, even bigger problem. All right, so on to number 3, and then I promise I'll get to some solutions here. So BS number 3 is what we choose not to know because it's a place we simply don't want to go. So every single day, I guarantee you, you get asked this question by somebody that you work with. Hey, how's it going? And your response is probably something like this. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks, I'm good. And yet you probably feel a little bit more like this guy, just trying to get I just, oh my gosh, everything is. So my question for you is, why are you answering like this when you feel like this? I want you to sit with that for a second, because I think we are not wanting to go to those places. We're not wanting to address these things because it tells a story about ourselves that we don't want to tell. So I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds and just let you think about what is the story that it tells if you answer honestly to the question, hey, how are you? How many of you found the story to be something like, I'm weak, I need help, I don't feel well, I think I might have a problem? What story does that tell about me? And I think we live in a society where it's expected, especially based on social media, where we're only posting our best things, where it's expected that we're all put together, everything is fine, everything is normal. And the story is, if we're not in that space, then we're not healthy. And I think the exact opposite is true. If we're fine all the time, something's not right. So be willing to go there. Be willing to say, look, I need some help. Because here's the story we tell ourselves. Asking for help is weak. Asking for help means that I'm not a strong, successful person. I want to change that story by asking you this question. I think most of us are probably hardest on ourselves. Listen sometimes to the negative chatter that you have going on in your head all day long. That I'm weak, oh, I can't ask for help. It tells a different story than I want to tell. And yet, I would ask you, if your best friend said some of the things to you that you say to yourself, would you still be friends with that person? I'm guessing probably not. So how is it so easy for us to treat our best friend with the kindness that we would expect from them to treat us with when we say, I'm not doing well? And yet we can't treat ourselves with that same kindness. So I want to change the story for you. I want you to treat yourself more like you would treat your best friend. Be willing to go there. Because once you know your BS, you have to reject what was initially acceptable to you. So this is work done by a colleague, Franz de Waal. And the monkey here has a task. He's asked to give the researcher a rock. He gets a cucumber in reward. You can see he's pretty happy about that. The other monkey has to do the exact same thing, only this guy is going to get a grape. Now, what you need to know is that grapes are the best thing that monkeys can get. And so the first monkey's like, oh, sweet, we're getting grapes now. And he goes and he gets a cucumber. No, not okay. And you can see he gets really upset about this. What is going on? I need this. I need the right thing. Gosh darn it, I'm doing the same exact task, and this guy's getting grapes. I don't even think I want to do this anymore. The researcher has to encourage him, and finally he does the task again, and once again, he gets a cucumber. Nope, unacceptable. I want to challenge you all today to be that monkey, to be willing to look directly at your BS, at the stories that you're telling yourself about weakness as it relates to stress, and reject it because it's no longer acceptable. There's something better. There are grapes to be had out there. So once you know your BS, you have to be willing to reject what was initially acceptable, no longer normalizing stress in your life. So let's start to change the story. We're going to move through this series of awareness to action to ultimate adaptation. This is the AAA, right? The first being awareness. How do we become aware of our stress? Now, I want to tell you a really quick story, and it starts a little bit on a sad note. So this January, I was in the ER. My sister was terminally ill, and she was going to pass that week, and I was in the ER, not because that's where she was. I was there because I was that sick. I had been so focused on her and trying to take care of her and do right by her, and that I completely neglected myself, and I ended up with all the itises. Now, this is a little ridiculous given that I am a stress physiologist and know better. But listen, that's the story that I tell myself. It's easy to preach, it's a lot more difficult to live it. When my sister passed, I ended up looking like this guy. Yeah, before my shave. But I was eating carbs left and right, and oh, right. 16 pints of Ben and Jerry's in, I would stop and say, oh, I'm stressed. Got it. Becoming aware is a lot more tricky than we tell ourselves. So we have to be willing to be the non-expert. Again, I'm an expert in this stuff, and I still struggled to live by my own advice in a difficult situation. So how do we become the non-expert? Well, first of all, I want to encourage you all that you already are experts in a lot of things, like counting, probably counting to 10 at least, the letters of the alphabet, I'm sure, I'm confident. So all I want to do is I want to give you about 30 seconds again to read the sentence just here in this box, and all I'm going to ask you to do is to count the number of F's, that's the letter F, in the sentence. Go ahead and do that now. A lot of you are probably seeing 2, 3, maybe a few of you see 4, 5, 6. Those of you that are seeing 2 or 3 are kind of a little bit nervous right now, probably. Who's seeing 6, 7? Anybody see 7? 7? What? What is going on here? There are, in fact, 7 F's. If you don't see them, don't worry. I'm going to highlight them right now. Probably you all got finished, files, and scientific, correct? So those 3 are usually pretty simple. The other 4 that people miss are of, and of. There are 7 F's in that sentence. If you only saw 2 or 3, don't worry, you're in the majority. But here's how that works. See, our brains are trained in the same way that our brains have been trained culturally not to see certain stressors as a problem. Our brains are trained to see the letters that say, because F says, that's the story we tell. And yet, F sometimes says, oh. It's not quite the same sound. And yet you were trained that F says, so you see finished, file, scientific, no problem. You miss of, because F doesn't say of. It's this weird trick of your brain. So when we step outside of that and we're willing to be the non-expert about ourselves, about the stories that we tell ourselves, about the stressors that we find ourselves in, we're able to actually break down and start taking action on some of the awarenesses that we may have missed before. So here's the first action for you to do. Wake up. And I know I've been talking now for 30 some minutes, so you may start to drift a little bit. That's not what I'm talking about. I want you to wake up your conscious mind. Remember, we talked at the beginning about living in sort of this ancestral mindset, and 99.99999% of the time operating from these pre-programmed subconscious programs. So in order to control your stress, in order to start telling a new story, you have to become more conscious. And that takes some work. So here's the strategy that I'm going to give you. Since we're already carrying around these things all the time, what I'd like for you to do this week is set 6 alarms to randomly go off throughout the day. Now, you're going to hate me this week, I promise. And it's not going to be that much fun. But every time that alarm goes off, all I want you to do is shut it off. Take a deep and conscious breath and just check in with yourself. Where am I? What am I doing? What is it that I'm appreciating in this moment? What am I grateful for right here? Right now, I'm appreciating that I am inside because it's a miserable day outside. I have the opportunity to speak with you. All right, I'm conscious. I'm going to go back to my work now. And I'll slip right back into that subconscious programming. But you know what happens when you set alarms? If you set an alarm to wake up, I don't know, say at 6 a.m. every morning, what time do you actually wake up? Probably 5:58 or so, because you've trained your brain to wake up at that time. So as you continue this program of setting these alarms throughout the day, what you'll notice is that you'll train your brain to consciously wake up a little bit throughout the day, and you'll be able to start shutting off those alarms and maintain a conscious state. This is such a gift. This is such a gift because when we're now aware, when we're living in this conscious frontal lobe, we can avoid some of the reactionary processes that keep us stuck in that stressful cycle. So here are some of the other actions that I want you to take. First of all, let's explore being busy. I'm going to guess that if I asked you that question that I had posted for BS number 3, hey, how you doing today? You might say, I'm fine, I'm stressed, or I'm busy. All right. We're going to work to eliminate busy from your vocabulary because to me, busy is a 4-letter word. Busy is an ego-driven word because I want you to think about that. What does it mean if I'm busy all the time? Well, if I'm busy, that must also mean that I'm important. I think that's a false connection. So being busy, I think we think that the opposite of it means that we'd be lazy. And I think that's false. The opposite of busy isn't lazy. The opposite of busy is efficient. So when you're at work, be present, be conscious, be at work, do your job, and then go home. Be efficient, and then go home and be efficient and effective and present where you are. Efficiency is what it's about. Too often, we spend our whole lives being busy. And we neglect to be anywhere, any one place. We're at work and we're thinking about the things we have to do when we're home. We're at home, we're thinking about all of the work that we have to do, and we stay busy in this confuddled state at all times. Be efficient. So here's some of the ways that you can be more efficient. You can be more efficient by listening to what it is that your brain needs. Your brain needs some calm. And what does this look like? Well, if this person on the left looks a little bit like you every day, you're in the normal space of multitasking, and all of us multitask. The reality is none of us multitask because there's no such thing as multitasking. Multitasking is actually switch tasking in the brain. The brain is incapable of doing 2 things at once. So while I'm talking to you, if I wanted to check the email really quick, now I'm checking my email, now I'm back to you, now I'm back. I can't actually do 2 things at once. As many of you will probably say, yeah, but I can do it. Nah, your brain is just going back and forth, back and forth. And every time you do that, it's costing your brain an absurd amount of energy and time. It actually produces brain damage. Now, don't panic, it's recoverable. But when you multitask, you create brain damage in the frontal lobe. In fact, if you're multitasking, you're reducing your IQ by about 15 points. Now, if you're not working with IQs on a regular basis, let me give you an example of what that looks like. The average IQ in America is about 100. The difference between average and mentally impaired, about 15 points. So if you're multitasking, you're operating from a space where you may be operating in a mentally impaired capacity. That's not ideal. So we have to stop multitasking. If you need an example of what switch tasking looks like, here's what I want you to do with me right now. All right, all I want you to do is to spell your name out loud. So Rebecca, my name, Rebecca, and then I'm going to count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So Rebecca, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Go ahead and do that with your own name. Pretty simple, right? Now I'll ask that we multitask. In other words, we're going to spell and count at the same time. So now it's R1, E2, B3, E4. Do you see how much more difficult that is? Go ahead and try it yourself. It takes a real toll on the brain to have to multitask. So again, consider that the next time that you're tempted to answer the phone while you're texting or emailing. It's also really useful for the brain to minimize decisions. So again, you're stuck with this ancestral brain, and the ancestral brain only had to deal with 1 or 2 decisions throughout the entire day. Do I go out and hunt? Do I stay inside? Do I need to...
Oh, we lost you, Rebecca. We lost your audio for a second. Rebecca, we lost your audio for a second. Hold on. We lost your audio for a second, Rebecca. Can't hear you. You might try turning the webcam off. Maybe that would take a little less bandwidth. But we love seeing you. We were just talking about how we can't possibly have a perfect webinar technology-wise. Hopefully, she will be back with us soon. If you need to, Rebecca, and you can hear me, you can always switch to the phone call. So if you click the audio, you can dial in and not use the internet connection for your voice. So hold on, because we're getting to the good stuff. You can go back and switch tasks now. Oh, hopefully we'll get her back here in a moment. And I'm just going to hang tight as well. I'm just sending her a message.
Hello.
Hello, you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Good. Okay. Can y'all hear me and see me okay?
I can hear you and see you, so I'll go with that.
Can you see the screen? The PowerPoint?
Yes, you're on the brain needs calm.
All right. So let's, Are we back to where we need to be here? All right. I apologize. I don't know what happened there.
I don't either. Off you went. Like I said, if it happens again, you can always dial in on the phone. So if you hit the audio button, it'll give you the number to call. But hopefully, we're on the home stretch. So hopefully not.
We're close. Okay, yeah. Super. Thanks for bearing with us, guys.
Sure.
All right. So where am I? Minimize decisions. Okay, so when you wake up in the morning, you're still deciding what kind of cereal you want to have, and before you even get to anything really important, and your brain just isn't equipped to make lots of decisions throughout the day. You need that brain power to be saved for really important decisions. So you may have noticed people like Barack Obama, Steve Jobs are classically wearing, Albert Einstein, the same outfit over and over again. And that's not a fashion choice. That is actually a result of them actively minimizing the decisions that they have to make to save their brain power for the more cognitive decisions that they'll need later. Okay, so the final brain need that I want to talk about right now is this concept of an aesthetic universal. So this is what it looks like. This started out as kind of a joke. A couple of Russian artists decided that they were going to paint the most beautiful picture that the world has ever seen. And they went through and they pulled 17 different countries, thousands of individuals from each of the countries on What do you want to see in the most beautiful picture? Do you need, and the results came in, and they painted a picture for each of these countries that would encapsulate all of this data on the most beautiful thing they could possibly create. Here's America. This is what the most beautiful picture looks like from Americans. France, Iceland, China. You might be noticing the theme here in that they all came out with the same elements. So mountains, grasslands, trees, evidence of animal life. These are the things that your brain requires in order to feel safe, in order to feel calm. So how do you create this space for your brain on a regular basis? Well, let's start with water. Your brain needs water. And I am not just talking about the iced tea, coffee, whatever it is that you drink.
Hey, Rebecca, while you're taking a drink, your slides are still, what we're seeing is the brain needs calm. It doesn't look like it progressed.
Okay, let me see.
It maybe pause screen and then share screen again.
Let me pull that up. Sorry. Thank you for letting me
When
know.
we lost you, that's what happened.
I don't think that I am the. I don't think I
Oh,
can
you as the presenter? Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on. It's easy to fix.
Thanks for letting me know.
Yes,
Some of those are pretty important.
I know.
Want to make sure you guys can see it. Okay. So.
You're back.
Excellent.
Brain needs water.
Let me just show you very quickly these.
Oh, there we go.
These 4 images of the perfect painting, right? The most beautiful painting. And you can see they're really, really similar. All right. So one of the things your brain needs is water. And I'm not talking iced tea. I'm not talking coffee. It's great if you drink all of those things, but you absolutely have to drink water, straight up water, because even a 2% dehydration will launch you into a stress response. And when you're in that stress response, remember, you're not thinking with your conscious cognitive frontal lobe. You're only working out of this reactionary amygdala space. So make sure that you are drinking water. Your brain also needs real food. Now, I'm sure you get lectured all the time on nutrition, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. All I want to say is your taste buds are always going to lie to you, right? You're going to be craving those fats and sugars, but your stomach will not. So when you're hungry, eat, and eat something real. When you're not, stop eating. Your brain needs green. It needs some greenery in order to feel safe and secure. Now, this is really easy to fix. I actually have a green plant on my desk. Thank you very much. And you'll notice something special. It's fake. And I have a black thumb, but you can get the exact same benefits from real plants, fake plants, even a picture of a plant, because your brain just isn't that smart, forgive me. But you'll increase your ability to concentrate, your physical health, your job satisfaction, your creativity, and your productivity, and decrease your blood pressure, your anxiety, and your cortisol just by putting something green in your office. All right, this is the big one. Your brain needs sleep. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sleep is the one time where your cortisol levels, your main stress hormones, naturally decrease. And a lot of people will say, oh, I'm fine with 5 hours a night, no big thing. It's a very big thing. You have normalized your lack of sleep the same way you've normalized stress in your life. You have to get sleep. It's the only time when the blood-brain barrier expands and allows all the toxins that you build up in your brain throughout the day to escape. If you don't sleep, you're going to have a very foggy brain. And these are the biggest culprits in the bedroom. You are not allowed to have screens in the bedroom, because the second you look at the screen, light hits your eyeballs. And guess what? The only natural source of light is the sun. And so your brain thinks it's morning time and it's time to wake up. And it starts all of the physiological processes that it takes to wake your body up in the middle of the night. Now, even if you go back to sleep after looking at your phone to check the time, you're still not getting a great quality of sleep. So eliminate screens from the bedroom. We have this natural circadian rhythm of alertness when we're more awake or less awake. This is that 2 o'clock dip throughout the day. I know you all are familiar with that. It's coming up for me. When our level of alertness just kind of dips. And here's what typically we do. We go and we grab a cup of coffee, right? I'm going to give you an alternative suggestion. I think right then is when you need to take a nap. This fits with the biological rhythm of your body. And by taking a 20-minute nap, you're going to increase your logical reasoning, your alertness, your reaction time, the number of tasks you complete throughout the day. So those of you that are telling me, I don't have time for a nap, no, you do, because you'll get more done. And you'll do all of this better than if you have a cup of coffee. Now, if you're a coffee freak like me, have your cup of coffee and then take a nap. It's going to take about 20 minutes for that caffeine to kick in, and boom, you'll wake up ready to go. All right, you also need to breathe. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous because you're all doing that all the time, right? But the breath is really special in that it's the only thing that consciously connects your subconscious to your conscious mind. So you're subconsciously breathing all the time, but you can pause and take a conscious breath. And here's what that does. When you do that, you're shutting down all of the processes here and lighting up your cognitive conscious self. It allows you to step outside of that stressful space that you operate in. All three of these geniuses, great leaders, Rupert Murdoch, Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, all had one thing in common, and that was a meditation practice. Every morning they started their day with a meditation practice. Now, I was told once that I needed to meditate, and I have to tell you honestly, I was like, yeah, I don't do any of that woo-woo stuff. It's a little out there for me. And then a friend of mine showed me some research, it was her research, where she'd taken a group of non-meditators, scanned all of their brains, put them through an 8-week-long, 20-minute-a-day program, and rescanned all of their brains. And she showed that in 8 weeks' time, with this meditative practice, she changed the shape and function of all of their brains, such that the amygdala was shrunk and the frontal lobe, she grew gray matter in. I was floored. I immediately started meditating. And there's a number of ways to do this. Don't feel like you can't do it or that you're not doing it right, or if you're noticing you just can't quiet your brain, it's okay. If you're noticing things coming into your mind, you're meditating. There's tons of apps. There's the Calm app, there's Headspace app. Find something that works for you, but commit to doing some meditation. Your brain also needs a shift in perspective. And this is really simple, and it sounds super cheesy, but it's one of the best things that you can do to rewire your brain. Replace the phone by your bed with a journal. And every day, take 30 seconds at the end of the day and scribble down 3 things for which you are grateful. What that's going to do is it's going to change the negative bias in your head. You are programmed to see the negative. If I see 1,000 smiling faces, I'm not going to notice them. I'm going to notice the one that's scowling at me, because that's the threat, that's the danger. And that's the thing that our brains are pre-programmed and predisposed to focus on. But when I start to write down things that I am grateful for, things that I notice throughout the day, it changes the perspective of my brain. It changes the way I approach the world. And I start looking and seeing the positive things. I start getting more comfortable with the discomfort. It's a really powerful switch that you can make in 30 seconds or less a day. All right, so ultimately, adapting our brain to deal better with these discomforts, with these stressors in our life. Well, a few companies have taken on these challenges, and what you're going to see are the exact same statistics that I showed you to start off this program with. They're taking on these challenges. They're taking on meditation and green plants, and what they're finding are huge changes. Increasing productivity, increasing decision-making process, huge savings in healthcare. Because the reality is your brain is highly adaptable. You are capable of making incredible changes to lower your stress and live more productive, happier lives. My father was a minister, and I spent many, many years listening to him speak, but I only remember a single sermon, and it was this one. He stood in front of his congregation with an open water bottle, and he shook it like crazy, and water's going everywhere. And he asked his congregation a simple question. He asked them, why does the water spill out? And the answer was, of course, the water spills out because it's water that's inside. So what's inside of you? When life shakes you, which inevitably it will, what spills out? And I think it's the same for all of us. Fear spills out. Until we're willing to address the stories that we tell ourselves, the BSs that we have in our lives, fear will be our automatic response. So we have to challenge ourselves to do better, to become fearless. And I don't mean walk out in front of the Greyhound bus because you're fearless. That's just dumb. But fearless. actively and consciously choose the things that you want to be fearful of. There are certainly things that you should fear, but other people, other situations that are outside of your control aren't things that we need to be stressed over every single day. You have the power to control your own evolution. It is the greatest gift of any species. We have this incredible frontal lobe that provides us with the opportunities to make our own decisions and to evolve into becoming instinctively cognitive rather than reactionary people. So please take full advantage of that. Use it. Use these techniques to reduce the stress in your life. And I look forward to hearing back from you any incredible results that you have. Looking forward to having happier and more productive lives for you all. My best wishes to you, and thank you so much for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the questions panel. For Rebecca, you've got access to a doctor for 5 minutes and a scientist. And maybe I think we've talked about this before, it's a little challenging sometimes in the venues to find spaces and allow for this type of kind of a new way to live. And even if it's just breaks and that being okay at the right time. And so it's a kind of a slow transition, I think, to get people that work in a very fast-paced environment like this. I do know that in the medical field, I've got several doctors, nurses, professionals in my family that they're actually okay. Those folks go off and rest. It's not unusual to find a doctor taking a nap in the middle of a day at hospital, pre-surgery, post, whatever, because they understand that, and we've sort of stigmatized it in our workplace. And so I hope that we did something to help destigmatize a better way to work, because at the end of the day, that's going to make it better. But anybody that's on have a question, or if you have a comment that you want to share with us on anything that you've done in your venue, would be fantastic. And I see one popping up right here. So just a moment.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is the stories that we tell ourselves about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And you have to be the one to model that appropriate behavior for yourself and for your employees and for the venue.
That's true. That's what you asked me. I was telling Rebecca how we have a relaxation room here at TicketForce, and that I often feel like there's a bit of a stigma still if people use that, which we're getting better. And then she challenged me and said, how many times do I go in there a day? And I was like, ooh, not very much. So my team's listening. I'm going to be working on being an example to you by using that room. I kind of tend to wait till I feel like I need it, and then I don't. Because I'm not taking it slow down. So I'm like, well, I didn't need to go in there. We sort of all wait till we're like really tired, or we're getting a migraine, or our eyes are hurting, because that makes it okay to take the rest, right?
Exactly.
So Paul San says the example you use, counting the F's, I learned the best way to challenge the brain and read backwards.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love that. And there's little things that you can do all the time to challenge yourself. Try brushing your teeth with the opposite hand. It sounds ridiculous, but it creates a new way of thinking that your brain actually has to think about some of these mundane tasks that you do on a regular basis. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Reading backwards.
Yep. Anybody else get questions or comments? Anything that you find that relates? I can tell you from experience, I started using the Calm app.
Good.
And after I heard Rebecca speak the first time, and I am not an everydayer yet, but it's remarkably, it goes by fast. I don't wear the orange wrap like the monks.
I get to shave my head as well, but I think that those are a lot of the reasons that people don't get into meditations. They say, oh, I can't do it, or I'm not dedicated enough, or every little bit helps. So be willing to challenge yourself to try something that's a little outside of your comfort zone.
It has this cool little thing where it does one gong.
Yes.
Like about at the normal time when I had been doing. It's like if you don't do it, it does this little reminder and it's just a gong. And I'm usually just getting woke up and I hear that and it's like, oh, hello.
Time to meditate.
Mm-hmm. But I really do enjoy it. It's not hard and you can't do it wrong.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep. No other
anybody
questions?
else? Hey,
Anything?
way to go. Paul says he's going to start bringing healthier treats for the box office staff instead of sweets.
Good. Oh man.
Fantastic. I don't know if they're on, Paul. They might be mad at you, but
Yeah, but you know what? You're doing them a favor in the long run. Anytime you're increasing sugar and blood glucose, your cortisol is also going up. So you're stressing yourself out more than you know by eating that chocolate bar, as good as it tastes at the moment.
yeah, absolutely. One of the best investments we make, and it is not inexpensive, but we have a machine called a bevy, and it
Uh-huh.
dispenses still and sparkling filtered water. And
Yep.
then you can put flavors in there that are all natural, sugar-free, those types of things. So it makes drinking water a little more fun, a little more pleasant,
Yep.
really easy. And we've got the ice machine to go with it. So we see a lot of water go down here in our office.
That's great.
Chris Fader is asking, is there a way you suggest to help transition from the stress of the workday to after when you go home and not take the stress with you? And man, that's in this market, that's particularly important. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, Chris, thank you for that. I think for me, one of the best things, and I'm privileged in that I work from home, so I don't have this work home separation. But I think that your transition time in the car can be really a valuable time to use. So what I'd like for you to do is turn off the music, turn off any distractions as you're driving, and just as you're taking yourself from the workplace to that transition to that home, just breathe. And I want you to just focus on breath. And what you'll find is, I guarantee you won't get 10 breaths in. So just one, right? And count. And by the time you get to 10, you'll be home probably before you make it. But getting into that conscious space and just shifting your mindset to a calmer state is really valuable, because when you're home, you need to be home. Eliminate that busy factor, right? When you're at work, be fully present, be fully engaged. But that transition time is really useful time that you can meditate in the car. And I'm not saying to close your eyes. Please don't close your eyes when you drive, right? But meditation can just be a presence, a releasing of all of the stressors from the day and getting prepared to enjoy your time at home. I hope that's useful.
Yep. Anybody else? And then we will close it out today. He says, thanks. I'm going to give that a try today. So that's great, Chris. Let us know how it goes.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do too, sorry, is if that doesn't work, use a guided meditation. There's a bunch of free guided meditations. I mean, everything from the absurd, using a lot of obscenities, which sometimes can be really fun, actually, and give you a nice chuckle, to the very calming ones. Find what works for you, but I would recommend doing a meditation while you drive.
I know we've got a good number of our folks on Facebook and Twitter. Is that your Twitter handle down there at Dr. Rebecca?
That is my Twitter handle, my Facebook. You can find me, reach out to me. Any follow-up questions, any concerns, please do not hesitate.
Yep.
Yep, always happy to help any way that I can.
Yeah, and we would love it if you want to continue this conversation on any of those channels. You can jump on our TicketForce page, or just tag us on and tag Rebecca as well on Twitter so that we can kind of follow that. And last question, Paul is asking if you recommend yoga.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I recommend anything that gets you into that meditative space. So yoga is one of those great things that you get a little bit of exercise as well. And I am not a yogi, so I can't tell you all of the specific types of yoga. I know there's all kinds of different types. Find something that works for you. Yoga can be a great space to practice meditation in. For me, I can only sit still for about 10 minutes. So that's my morning meditation. But I do walking meditations, running meditations, biking meditations. Some people do meditations doing yoga. So I think yoga is an awesome practice. By all means, give it a shot.
Yeah, but some folks do get to a really clear-headed space, whether like if you're you're a runner, or you're a walker and you're outdoors or you're hiking. There's people that in all those kinds of activities get to the same headspace that you can get in a yoga class.
Absolutely.
So if you're a person that needs to move, and you're fidgety, then that can be really great for you. Or cycling. We've got a fantastic spin class, cycle real near the office here at TicketForce. We have a lot of people that lift weights,
That's
and
cool.
we're
Good.
getting there.
Good.
So, well, thanks everybody. We look forward to continuing this conversation. These are efforts that we think are really important here at TicketForce for our staff, and we want to just share out something. We really recognize the level of stress that all of our venues and box offices and ticketing folks work under, and we have a lot of fun, and we're just blessed and lucky to work in the entertainment industry and to help people find a release through going to live events, and we love that. But the backside of that is that we're all working really hard to make sure that hour or 2 or 3 goes perfectly and is a wonderful experience for our audiences. And so we all understand, we all share that type of stress. And lastly, I just want to close out today. I'm thanking Rebecca so much and thanking all of you, all of our speakers this week. Every year I say the conference gets better, and I can continue to say that with confidence here. Because it is November, I do want to just mention that INTIX, which is our International Ticketing Conference, is coming up in January. It is in Texas this year, and I encourage you to go to intix.org and check out sending as much of your staff. We send a fairly large team from TicketForce so that they can stay up on industry trends. So some people go to INTIX just when they think they're looking for a ticketing platform. And of course, you have one, so you may not always feel like it's a good time for you to go. There are a lot of sessions, a lot of things about ticketing in general that are going to hit multiple people. And also, a lot of times people just send their box office staff. I think it's very critical for marketing, for directors, for everyone that works the venue. Ticketing touches you in one way or another. So I can't plug enough for you to check out INTIX, sign up for the newsletter. They're putting great content out all the time on their newsletter and online, so follow them everywhere you can. And we want to see as many of you as possible at INTIX this January in Gaylord, Texas. So at least we're not in a cold weather state, and it should be a good time. So again, Rebecca, thank you. Silent applause.
Thank you. I'm so grateful.
And thank you so much again. And again, we're sad to close out, but we're so happy for the interaction. We hope that we gave you something of value this week and something that will help you be better, be more productive in every area in your venue and your ticketing. So thanks again, clients. We love you all, and we look forward to seeing you all next year at some point. Bye, Rebecca. Thank you.
Bye, thanks.